Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and joining me, as always, my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, Dr. Dave. Sounds like you might have had a little too much coffee this morning.
Yeah, just a touch, just a touch.
Okay.
All right. So we'd like to welcome our viewers and listeners back for another fun-filled, action-packed episode. And today's topic of all things is going to be the power of thought. The power of
Okay.
thought. So when we think about that power of thought, what comes to mind, Dr. Joe?
That is a pretty good topic. I know we've just kind of perusing our titles in the past. I know we talked about power of choice.
Yeah.
So power of thought, that's very interesting. But
Hmm.
so if I think of power of thought, I think of in terms of, all of our experiences, everything we've learned, our creativity, just all those things that are comprised in our head
Hmm.
that we have, are able to tap into. And so where I think the challenge is that we've become institutionalized to a certain degree, depending on your environment. For
Hmm.
example, being in the military for almost 35 years tends to kind of shape the way you see things, the way you view things, even the way you think about things.
Hmm.
So for me, that has been a challenge, just understanding or having that ability to look beyond that.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, even after I retired, for the first 6 months, and I probably already said this before on previous episodes, it was a challenge for me because I
Hmm.
no longer had that in my life. So I really struggled with, now what am I supposed to do?
Hmm.
Because again, I had been counting on that for so many years of my life that I um, almost forgot how to think on my
Hmm.
own and how to, take things in and put it back out. So that's just one example. Another example of, again, earning my doctorate degree
Hmm.
and really understanding the requirements for that degree also had me shift my mindset to, I have to do it this way, I have to always do this, I always have to do that. And so again, sometimes that lends to my personal life and my professional life today, just
Hmm.
because you had so many things that you had to accomplish, you had to do, that again, that having that ability to think differently was a challenge.
Yeah.
And so in terms of, maybe if you don't have those two things that are in front of you, but think about if you've been with an organization for 15, 20 years, and you start to put blinders on to just that way of thinking, just that way of doing things. And again, that could be a detriment if you, and we talked about having, starting projects or being on project teams, and everybody in the room has kind of the same thought process, the same, ideas. And then we challenge people that are or have the ability to use the power of thought because of all the experience, i.e., a new person.
Hmm.
They come in not having been in that environment for, a period of time, and they see differences immediately. They offer
Hmm.
differences immediately. And so that becomes a challenge for that core team or the team that are all similar or
Right.
mainly similar. Then this new person coming in, and all of us struggle that, have that already mindset of, okay, we're going to do it this way, or we like doing it this way. Then it becomes a challenge for that new person to share their power of thought and it be accepted. So
Right.
those are just some examples of how power of thought, for the most part, is probably limited if we've been in a certain environment, or that has kind of altered our ability to think outside the box.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what I think of when I think of power of thought. And like I said, I didn't touch on how that could benefit us. I just mainly talked about
Right.
kind of where we are typically when we think of power of thought. So that's kind of where I don't know,
Yeah,
you might want to start.
you've given us a lot to think about. And as you were, talking about the power of thought and, the team environments and having those new eyes on things, to me, that's also a piece of creativity. Creativity and the power of
Right.
thought kind of go hand in hand. We mentioned just before that not everyone feels that they're necessarily creative, but
Right.
in many cases, we have our own form of creativity, whatever that is. Um, but to kind of bring it back to the power of thought, that's a big thing. I mean, you mentioned being institutionalized, and we could say that with just about any environment that it has had a significant impact on one person's life, from an environmental perspective, or it could just be, like you said, the duration of that exposure. So, I wasn't I wasn't in the military as long as you were, but the 11 and a half years I was in did have a significant impact on me. Being in corporate America for so long, that had that you become institutionalized to that corporate perspective, which is different from a government perspective, which is different from a military perspective. So all these different um, avenues of thought feed into where we are right now. And what we can do is kind of unravel or unpack that, if you will. I think it's more of an unraveling of all those thoughts to think about creating that deliberate strategy. It's one thing to have these thoughts and ideas just kind of randomly when we brainstorm, and hey, that's a great idea, let's run with it. Yeah, that's the power of thought. But when we make it deliberate, like you and I did, for example, our doctorate degrees, that's a different level of power of thought, because now you're really doing that self-critical self-evaluation that we talk about so many times, and that reflection and thinking about the plans and the planning and the reverse engineering of your goals and everything that we've talked about. That power of thought is the culmination of everything that we've talked about, because now that we have that power, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to do nothing, or are we going to use it to our advantage? And that can be from, how can I get out of my current environment to a better environment? How can I get out of one position and into another position that I want to learn more about or experience it? Maybe it's a relationship thing, the power of thought. What do I, is this really right for me, the right environment? So the power of thought goes as far as your imagination will let you run. And we say that because and I'm going to go back to the example of, oh, you can't go that fast, and yet we broke the speed of sound. Oh, you can't go that high up, and we put people on the moon.
Right.
All these things that we perceived as not being possible before, because of that power of thought, we're able to push the boundaries of what maybe normal creativity is, or normal brainstorming, to really go out past that fringe to build something that has not been conceived before, or has been conceived, but we do it a better way or a different way.
Right. No, I'm glad you touched on that. Just the idea that if we did not use the power of thought, you're right, we would not have placed, people on the moon. We would not
Mm-hmm.
have, broken the sound barrier, because we would have been stuck
Mm-hmm.
in the thought that we can't go beyond that. We can't go higher than that. And I think that is, again, an example of power of thought. Having that ability to maybe not see it, visibly see it, but visualize it in our head that
Visualize
this
it, yeah.
that this is what could happen if we try that, if we push beyond those limits that have been set for us. Because we don't have any innovation or any creativity if we only work in that framework that's in front of us. We
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing to push the boundaries beyond, again, what's in front of us. So having
Mm-hmm.
that ability to visualize, and you said it, all those experience, all the things we've learned, all those interactions lead to that ability to take all of that and apply it in some form or fashion that helps us get to the next thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is how we harness that power, and to advance with that power, because we're, really intentional about how can we make this work beyond what we see? How
Mm-hmm.
can we,
Yeah.
push this beyond, again, the framework that's in front of me? How can I, or how can we get beyond that, and again, visualize what could be. And I think that's the power of thought. Is, again, you can't see it, you can't feel it yet, but you really have a strong sense based on, again, all the information that you have in front of you, and kind of a predictive
Mhm.
model of this is what it could be, and then allowing yourself to push that, and accept it or try it. I think
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing, because again, you may have it all written out based on formulas, everything else, but you may not have thought about the one variable that
Mhm.
just tosses it to the side. So, but having that ability to try that and saying, oh, wow, that didn't work. Let's try changing this variable just a little bit.
Mhm.
So that's what that power of thought helps us with. Again, recognizing what has occurred. And we, again, based on information. Again, I don't want us to think that we can just get a random thought in our head and say, hey, let's go,
Mhm.
without having any really thought
Without putting
about.
any thought into
Yeah,
it.
exactly. About, how does that affect anything else? How can we do this? I got this great idea. I don't know how to, make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to really think in the terms of, okay, there are some boundaries that we don't want to just break or try and
Mhm.
push past, because there are some limitations. So, but yeah, just really consciously thinking about, okay, if we started here, or we had this, what if we pushed it just a little bit further beyond? What if we
Yeah.
tried this? What if we tried that variable? What if
Yeah.
we.
And I like that boundary pushing thing because, it's it's positive collaboration is the way I view it.
Right,
When you get fresh eyes or just a fresh perspective on something, that new thought-provoking idea, that idea that comes out from, teams being there, or just maybe even self-isolation or meditation, these things start becoming clearer to us. And when we share these ideas, it's not to be scoffed at or laughed at, or,
right,
say
right,
that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. It's more about, hey, this sounds silly, but let's think about it for just a
right.
few
Yeah,
moments and think about, even though it's silly, is it feasible or possible? Or what would it take to make that happen? What would it take to make a vehicle go faster than the speed of sound? What does it take to get that? And using the power of thought to really strip down this idea into its components and pieces and parts, and understand how they integrate together, and what's there and what's missing and what needs to be created to make that idea a full-fledged thought that has been that is cultivated into something that something more tangible.
right.
And I think it's interesting when we push these ideas around. Some people, are just not open. They can be closed-minded,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's not a good or bad. That's just, it is what it is. But being able to push those boundaries and knowing what our personal boundaries are with thought allows us to push past those boundaries. We have to
Right.
understand what our boundaries of thought are before we can push past them. Because if you say, well, I know what my boundaries of thought are, well, then what's beyond your boundaries of thought? Because
Right.
otherwise we're just brainstorming. There's not a lot of conscious effect, in place when you brainstorm. It's just, what are these ideas that are coming up? But when we use the power of thought to strip something down into its pieces and identify what it takes to make it possible, now we've taken it to another level, to your point.
Well, and again, it goes back to, really taking stock in what you've learned, what you've read, what you experience, because those are going to be some of those things that help you push beyond, having that open mindedness that, yeah, I see this, I read this, I know this, but are we still able to push past this a little bit? Are we able
Mhm.
to challenge this theory a
Yeah,
little bit? Because yeah, nothing will change if we don't have that mindset. If
yeah.
we don't continue to evaluate, okay, is this the end all be all? I mean, if we've reached the end of the internet,
Mhm.
type of thinking, or what can we go push beyond to get that accomplished? So
Yeah.
yeah, it takes that intentional thought of, can we go further than this? But it, again, has heavily to do with your experiences, what you know, what you think,
And
uh
what you know you don't know.
right, right.
for me, um, that's a piece of that is just recognizing, it's not not challenging someone in a negative way, but challenging them to say, hey, what are some of these pieces and parts? What do they look like? And just because you have the power of thought doesn't mean you have all the answers.
Right,
I'm sure
right,
the first person who thought about flying did not develop a flying machine, because I'm sure, I'm confident, and I'm not a scientist in this area, but I'm pretty sure that human beings have been thinking, wow, it'd be neat to jump off of that high area and be able to go someplace without dying,
right, right,
So
right,
we can do that now. But so my point is, just because you have that idea and can break it down doesn't mean you have the absolute solution. That's knowing and respecting other people's power of thought and how it can be integrated to solve an issue, or develop something beyond just an idea.
right. And you mentioned it earlier, that's why those brainstorming sessions are very important, but
Mm-hmm.
not just to think about, what you have in front of you, but again, having that ability to push beyond those
Mm-hmm.
limitations that you might see or think you see. So that's why it's important to again invite that new perspective, that new
Yeah.
idea, and not just discount it at the very beginning, which
Mm-hmm.
many of us have been in those type of environments where we say we're going to brainstorm, but then, like you say, their idea is scoffed at the very beginning,
Yeah.
or it's already marginalized at the very beginning. We
Right.
don't even consider it
Hey,
beyond
we
that.
haven't even explored it,
Right, right,
even if it's just something that seems totally unrelated. Well, let's explore this and understand how it can relate,
right,
or how it can do something that we didn't expect.
right,
So that, I think, is the one of the wonderful things about the power of thought, is it's only limited by our creativity.
right. Absolutely. And so again, that's why it's funny. You talk about creativity. Some of us can identify it immediately. That just thinking beyond what's in front of us, having that ability to do that. But sometimes we don't realize we have it because it does take a little bit of creativity to think beyond. Okay, this is my problem, let's push it beyond just this. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, having that ability to break it down, see the parts, pieces, just having that creativity. And it could be based on you being an artist. It could be based on the experience that you had. It could be
Mm-hmm.
based on a lot of different things. But realizing that creativity is part of it, whether you
Yeah.
identify it as or not, because you're trying to
Part of the
create
thinking
something.
process,
It
part
is.
of
It is.
the thinking process.
Again, none. The technology change, all the things that have occurred in all these recent years. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen if we again sit in a room. Even the top experts in their areas. If we still only base it on, okay, this is my experience, so this got to be it, and then you got another person
Yeah.
next to you saying the exact same thing, then you haven't accomplished anything.
Yeah.
It's that ability based on those experiences you've had, and again being able to see beyond what's the next step
Mm-hmm.
in this progression of this
Yeah.
thing, and then that the
That
person next to you
collaborative
saying the same thing
environment
exactly, and
and
then
mutual
it
respect
opens
for one
up
another.
to
Yeah.
now we all start to see how those pieces come together.
Yeah.
And so that's the gain or the benefit of really using that power of
Mm-hmm.
thought, because again, it doesn't matter if you've got all the top level experts in whatever their fields are, and you all come into a stalemate because you're only thinking, well, my piece of it is more important than yours,
Right.
or this is the
Or
limitation
you're
of my
stuck in
piece.
that one mindset,
Right.
that
Yeah.
institutionalized
Yep.
perspective, and we have to break out of that. What can we,
Right.
what's the next thing? How can we take this to the next level? To your point, what's after this? Once we
Right.
accomplish this, what's that next phasing or iteration or version of what we've created, that service, that product, that idea? And we can have versions of ideas. The first automobile was not the first idea of an automobile is not the one that went into mass production.
Right. Yep.
So,
Yep.
there's all, you can start with one idea, wind up someplace completely different through the thought process, and wind up with something even better than what you originally had thought of. And
Right.
same with on the personal side, some people struggle in relationships, and it doesn't have to be that necessarily. You have to think about, what do you really want out of this relationship, or this scenario or this trip or this vacation or these 30 minutes by yourself, and
Right.
what do you want to get out of it, then what do you need to do to get that out of it, and start breaking it down that way. It can be collaborative, or it can be for your own personal self-improvement. So
Well,
the power of thought is really just that. Like we mentioned, it's the power of thought.
Well, you even mentioned, personal relationships. So, if your experience in the past is that it's been terrible,
Mhm.
the person with these characteristics, this is how it worked out. Well, if you use your power of thought or experiences, then you can look at, well, these are a couple of things I want to check off the box as not doing or not
Right. What
considering what
should I
I'm looking
not do
for.
this time? Yeah.
Exactly. So it makes sense for us to do that in everything we do. Again, even just selecting a potential partner, or
Hmm.
those types of things should be considered. And some of us, again, as younger me would say probably not. But now, again, that I have the life experiences and some of the things that have occurred, now I view it differently.
Hmm.
So again, it's taking that information, no different than me and Dave, providing the content we do on this podcast. It's based on our experiences. It's
Yeah.
based on, the things that we've encountered. Not to say that yours are going to be exact, but the idea that we're, offering you or handing you some of the things that have occurred to us, and maybe some potential solutions.
Yeah.
I heard this just the other day at a conference. Um, Someone said people grow, or develop by the experiences of other people.
Hmm.
Right. And I think that's very powerful because, again, no different than us telling our kids, hey, don't stick a fork in the electric socket or outlet
Yeah, that's a tough one
because
I'm
you're
still
going to.
struggling with.
So, or don't touch the stove because it's hot. Again, it's our experiences that we're passing off to other people so that they don't feel those negative outcomes because of that. And
Hmm.
that's, again, with the power of thought. It's the same thing. It's hopefully laying a roadmap to help people get to the next level.
Hmm.
Again, you already have started up that ladder, or you're climbing the stairs. um, it doesn't make sense for you to just keep turning around looking back and saying, hey, I made it, you
Hmm.
didn't, figure your own way out. It's more,
Right, right,
hey, you're going up this jagged edge, you're a rock climber, and say, hey, these are the look at my fingerprints, this is where I was.
right.
It'll make it easier versus
Yeah.
watching them reach
Definitely don't
out,
grab
fall
that,
down.
Brock.
Exactly. And that's really what power of thought is. It's, again, it's about that, being intentional about where you're going, how you're going to get there, but at the same time, open and keep your mind open to possibilities that you're going to gain something from
Yeah.
this. You're going to learn something from this. And I think when we get in those debates sometimes, especially in a project team, we fail to do that. We always, again, think my way or the highway, or my
Right.
way is better than yours. And it mainly is because we don't really have a good understanding of what your way is, or we won't allow it.
Yeah.
We stay closed minded. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the power of thought when it comes to like self-improvement or self-development or exploring new hobbies and that sort of thing. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't have considered doing in my younger days that I'm like, wow, that seems like that a really cool thing to try. And conversely, there are things that I thought were really cool when I was younger, like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane with a piece of fabric above me, a sheet. And now I'm
right.
like, yeah, maybe not the best idea today.
Right.
So, you can use the power of thought for a lot of different reasons and in a lot of different ways to help yourself grow and develop. And that gets back to learning a new skill set. What skill set do I have, or do I not have, that I wish I had, or that I would like to have, or that could help me in this phase of my life or in this area of my life. And that power of thought helps you to, again, strip those things down and take them apart to say, hey, I don't want to do that, but I can do that, and I want to do that, and to get
Right.
there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's more than one way to get from point A to point B. And so the power of thought is just that. It is your power to investigate your cognitive limitations and push yourself beyond there. There was a time when I was, in high school, I wasn't the greatest math student, but I wound up teaching myself college math literally because I didn't want to take the college class. I was going to try testing out of it. And I
Right.
missed testing out of it by 2 points. And I was frustrated. But then I realized, well, wait, I just taught myself college math because I was afraid of it.
Right.
I used the power of thought in a positive way and didn't realize the final outcome was much bigger than I had anticipated. So I wound up having to take the college math classes, and I did well in it. I didn't make straight A's through it, but it's that power of thought and understanding your boundaries and limitations and pushing past your comfort zone, getting out of that comfort zone sometimes to really understand what it is that can be achieved or accomplished or even considered and contemplated.
Right. No, I think that's, it goes back to kind of the statement I made about the power of thought in relation to creativity.
Yeah.
You,
Yep.
you just having the ability, learning the ability to do math. I mean, again, you wouldn't
I mean,
think of it in
I
terms.
knew basic math, Joe. I
Right,
mean, I
right.
knew basic
I know
math.
you were trying to advance from,
Yeah, I was
just
trying to get
addition and
past one plus
subtraction to,
one. I was trying to get past 1 plus 1.
but the whole idea that, you had the creativity in you.
Mm,
Once you focused on, okay, I want to learn this, then I'm going to do it. And a lot of times we don't view that as creativity. We just think,
yeah,
okay, I'm in the moment. I've got to do this. So, again, I think when we look at the power of thought, sometimes we don't think of it in terms of, you know, developing, growing, learning new
and sometimes we don't
skills.
give ourselves enough credit
No,
either.
we
I
don't.
mean, it,
Again, if you really think, even reflecting on that, if I reflect on a lot of different things based on my experiences, what I learned, and being limited or institutionalized, and then now if I look back, I'm like, oh wow, I pushed past that boundary. I was
yeah,
able to
that's the
challenge
cool
myself,
thing. Yeah,
and that, yeah. So if a lot of people would, if you would go back, reflect on some of those things that people said, oh, you can't do that, you're not, you don't have the qualifications, or you don't have the skills, and then you realize, well, who said your skill set or
right.
acquiring that skill set is based on your determination, not mine? Because like you just said, you weren't a college professor, but you taught yourself math.
Mhm.
Again,
And it
so
reminds me of something I saw online the other day. And it's very much has to do with what we're talking about. And it was talking about this musician who would gone to, I think, college, and their professor said, "You are not a singer. Just give it up. Find something else to do. You sing well, but you need to get something a little bit more normal, air quotes,
right,
normal,
right,
normal sort of income." And then a year later, that person was a multi-million-dollar platinum seller,
right,
because
yeah,
the power of thought. If I keep doing this, or if I keep listening to this person's negativity,
yeah,
I'm limiting myself and I know I can do more. So
absolutely,
what can I do to really do my absolute best? And then they did it. And within
right.
12 months, they went from zero to hero, if you will.
Right.
So,
And that was kind of where I was headed earlier. Just the idea that we're allowing other people to dictate,
yeah.
how far we go, what, and again, us having that power of thought to think beyond, okay, that's your version of success or
Hmm.
achieving. This is mine. And
Hmm.
that's what that person did. They're like, okay, so that's your opinion. And
Hmm.
I'm going to use my own process, the things I think that are important. And they continue to
Right.
push forward. Yeah.
All right. So we've got a couple minutes left, Dr. Joe. What final thoughts do you have? Thoughts do you have for our audience, viewers, and listeners?
I think we touched on a lot of different things, and maybe some that people may be familiar with, but just again, the power of thought is just having that ability to, I think we have it, but just I think the most important thing is having that ability to apply it. And I think you said that early on, to be able to use it for good, and not just sit on it and say, okay, I understand, I know that, but helping you to see beyond, maybe not what's directly in front of you, but being able to visualize
Mhm.
and apply what you've learned based on experiences, education, where the environment you've been in, just all those
Mhm.
things, and being able to utilize all those thoughts, all those experiences, and then applying them towards something. Like I said, it may not be visible today, but knowing that you have that, and remaining open to the possibilities. I think that's very important.
I like the way you rounded things out. It leaves a lot to contemplate, a lot to consider, and appreciate you sharing today, Joe. So with that, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning into another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. If you like what you hear or see or both, give us a like, share us, put it out there, share it with the rest of the world, your peers, colleagues, friends, family, whomever. Share the link, get the word out there. Joe and I love to do this. It's our weekly dialogue, and helps us keep our little bit of sanity left that we have. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and until next time, keep on being your not so ordinary you.